for the upcoming school year, in this case 2024-25. Last year, the balanced calendar was considered by the board on April 24th, last spring, a little bit less than a year ago, and it was tabled for future consideration. So I'd like to pick up from there as to what has happened. This year we had a balanced calendar steering committee who was formed in January of this year, actually of 2024, to inform the final recommendation for next school year, 24-25 calendar. The committee included 13 people representing the zone families, zone teachers, other staff members outside of the classroom, partners of the zone, and we had students participating in question and answer sessions as well. We reviewed, as part of our informing a final recommendation, we reviewed the SBCSE calendar for the next school year, 24-25. We went through a process where we invited members, we oriented them, provided them with opportunity for researching independently, researching materials provided from last year, journal articles, news types of articles as well, and videos, pros and cons, and just really to explore information on both sides of the balanced calendar. We collected new data, updated data, as well as, again, providing them the materials from the previous year. And we convened the team together, the steering committee, the balanced calendar committee, just a couple weeks ago, and had them engage in conversation, facilitated dialogue, provided them with the updated information in terms of data from stakeholders, and had some final dialogue for them to engage in a recommendation to us. And we are here. After that process, I'd like to thank every person that committed their time to the orientation, to the process, as well as to leaning into the conversation when we convened. I'm going to list our 13 committee members: Dr. Kwame Moore, Natural Baptiste, Charlotte Hawkins, Amelia Garcia, Teresa Crittenden, Mallory Lips, Angelica Esparza, Dr. Kwafle Bradley, Carlisha Gadsden, Board Member Jeff Ray, Barry Tyler Jr., Dr. William Tobin, and Julia Tao. Here we've captured a little bit of the updated data from our stakeholders. You can see student information from question and answer sessions, and the in favor, either way is fine, not in favor, percentages as well as numbers. You can see the numbers for families and percentages. We had a small group of families that we spoke to. And then staff engaged in a survey, and we have both those numbers, as well as on a scale of very much in favor all the way to not at all in favor, and the collective percentages for in favor, either slightly or very much, 43%, 57% not at all in favor, or slightly not in favor. The convening with the committee resulted in a recommendation, and our recommendation for the 24-25 school calendar is to, first of all, not adopt a balanced calendar for next school year, to pursue the school improvement grant with a balanced calendar model, if granted. The 24-25 school year would be a planning year in that case, and the zone would try out elements of the balanced calendar, and then 25-26 would be the year of implementation. We also are recommending to adopt a traditional calendar, our current calendar, with updates for next school year, which we'll visually show in the next slide, the next two slides. This would be the South Bend Empowerment Zone 24-25 school calendar that we are recommending for adoption, including some of the elements that we included again this school year, such as teacher preparation day, and teacher orientation, etc. And here, in the next slide, you can see it On the right-hand side, next to the South Bend Community School Corporation 24-25 calendar, same amount of school days, the same breaks as students have and staff have at SBCSC schools, quarterly teacher prep days, which we've received a lot of great feedback on, following the end of the quarter as opposed to at the end of the quarter. And then professional learning and planning for teachers is integrated into the calendar. And with that, that is our recommendation for your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll let me just share for a minute or two, because I had a chance to represent the board on the balanced calendar position. So just wanted to share a couple observations. One, a great appreciation just for being in the room with some really talented teachers, administrators, and staff who put some thought into this and had some very robust discussion about it. I think as we learned last year, there's a lot of benefits to having a balanced calendar. More than 3,000 schools across the country have implemented balanced calendars, have done it for a couple of reasons. One, to improve education outcomes for their kids. In many cases, behavioral problems were better, attendance was up, academic achievement was up. A lot of the research sort of informed the balance or the break and how beneficial that was to reset, if you will, and to have some additional focus, and to it seemed like there was less stress and strain, I think, amongst teachers and faculty. It is interesting. All of them have navigated similar questions as we had here, right? They all had to figure out how to do different things, right, and how to be different school corporations as well. I liked the many opportunities there. Especially on the stemming the summer learning loss or this idea that many kids don't have the opportunities in the summer that they need, and the balanced calendar gave them more access to opportunities with that balance throughout the year. So I think there's a lot of benefits to considering such a thing, which is why we've continued to have this discussion. The zone has been very much of this mindset of how do we improve education outcomes, how do we improve attendance, how do we improve achievement. This is a way some school corporations have figured this out. And one observation from one who talked about that, we operate on an agrarian calendar where this was established years ago so that everybody was off in the summer so they could harvest crops and some of that. It's largely gone unchanged, and so school corporations, as they try to think about how to do stuff, have really thought, how do we change our time, right? Time is one of those things we really haven't changed. We've tried everything else and such, and so so there's a lot of, I think, benefit, or the research, I think, really informs some good outcomes, I think, that happen. There are obviously some very real world challenges that go with it too, in terms of trying to balance kids in daycare, or what happens in those off weeks and those kind of things. All things that I think those other 3,000 schools have figured out. As Roxana reported, there wasn't the consensus to advance with it this year, but I also sensed some not a strong under no circumstances do we ever want this, and so I think the path that we had discussed pretty significantly was if the board elects not to make a recommendation about a balanced calendar this year, then we study this and contemplate, again, in kind of in future years where we maybe have a little more chance to do it. So obviously there's some pros and cons. I tried to share a lot of the pros, I think, from some of the research there, but appreciate Roxana's leadership in helping us better understand the topic, especially student or faculty and students and everybody who had contributed to a process here to try to figure out some common ground. My feel from looking at those other cities, this is not an easy decision by any means. And it's not a decision that everybody is going to agree with at some point, but ultimately, we I think in our discussion try to make sure we thought about or addressed a lot of those issues. And again, I think that if I had a preference, it was that we not rule this out forever. Maybe it isn't, maybe our timing isn't great for the next school year, but that again, some additional study could be warranted to decide whether this is something we should consider long term.
Yeah, I'd like to also express appreciation for the group that came together on a pretty important, difficult topic, a lot to consider. One question, is there any narrative data that could be compiled behind the answers? In other words, if somebody is strongly against it, do we have data or compile information as to why, as well as those that are strongly in favor of it? Could that information be gathered and provided to us?
The qualitative data is available in terms of comments, and we probably, because it was not a required item to expand on reasons, there might not be a one-to-one, but I most certainly can make sure that we can compile the information qualitatively for you.
If there's, and thank you for the qualitative word, that's the word I was looking for.
Can I offer, Ryan, just because I think that one of the challenges I saw with so a lot of the data I thought suggested from academic achievement, discipline, or attendance that there were real positives there. There's also what I would call a lot of real life issues, and I think that's that hard thing that's a little harder to put the qualitative side on it is they were trying to figure out what happens in those 3 weeks, and how do we do transportation, and what does childcare look like, and what if I have kids in one school and others kids. So the folks I think who had the most concern about it, concerns were really, I focus more on those, I would call it the real life issues in terms of the logistics piece, and less on the academic outcome or attendance and stuff like that. So I think that's where it's a little hard to put a data point to some of those real life things.
And that's I think exactly what I'm curious about, because I think the more informed we are on what some of the challenges are, then if it becomes a case of how do we meet our families in the middle, depending on whether those are just life issues, right, of moving kids around or different things, or if there's other items that maybe we can't control. That's what I'm curious about. Are the hesitations controllable or uncontrollable? And then go from there.
And looking at it from just a cost-benefit ratio, do you have any information that would suggest how long it takes to transition, to see the gains from the switch from one calendar to the balanced calendar?
To see academic gains? There's
gains.
quite a few benefits that occur, right, in terms of,
or just the collective benefit, maybe not one in particular, but to really see the gain.
Yeah, I can look into that. There are different research sources that really give you different information, might have a different focus, some of them achievement related and some of them not. In terms of time frame, right?
Time frame, yes.
The time frame.
Because it seems like it's something that we're interested in, but we're moving it down a year. And are we going to come to the same conclusion next year and then push it down the road again? And so, and I don't know that those challenges will be any different next year than they will be this year, but will the benefit outweigh the challenges? Because I imagine communities that I'm aware of experience the same challenges, but the benefit seems to outweigh the cost. And that's what I'm wondering, if we identified those benefits, and maybe it's just much larger than the cost or the impact or the challenges that might be there. Just a thought.
And not to, because I'm intrigued by the question here, because I wonder if the gains aren't a year plus out, right? So right now, let's just say hypothetically we decide on a balanced calendar for next year, and we start in July or August, let's say, because maybe it's too late to figure out. And so, so many communities talk about learning loss and how much learning loss happened over that long summer break in particular. So whether we were able to implement something quick enough to alleviate that this summer, or whether it's sort of the balanced calendar started and then it was next summer, right? I think those are good questions. I sort of think timing wise.
I would follow up to that point and say, Dr. Lewis, I think the key thing for me would be that, and I'm not suggesting this will happen, but that we continue to study this over the next few months so that we're not 6 to 9 months from now, we revisit this and we don't have a whole lot more information and it becomes as you said, Wayne, we go another year, we kick it down the curve, one of you said that. So I think continual evidence, information that you can provide to us here and there that can help us be informed as this moves along.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. To Board Member Ray's point, some of the issues are just beyond our control, right? They're legitimate issues, but they're beyond our control and things that we probably will not be able to address. So for example, many of our teachers, because as a society, we don't value teachers highly, we don't pay them well, they have to take summer jobs to supplement their annual teacher salary. So if we have a summer that doesn't align to the traditional model, for some teachers that is impacting their ability to get a job in the summer, working at a summer camp, or to do private tutoring, or whatever it is that they do, right, to supplement their income. In an ideal world, I would pay teachers twice what they get paid, but those things are beyond my control. And then we have our classified staff. Some of them are part-time, and so if you have intermittent breaks during the course of the year, that means there's going to be an intermittent impact on their hourly salary, right? So, folks that are salary, they get paid the same thing every 2 weeks, regardless of whether or not they work. That doesn't happen. Some of those things are outside of our control and would require partnership from other individuals. And that was something that we looked into last year to say, hey, is like organization A or organization B, could you work with us to have employment opportunities during these intermittent breaks for our part-time folks, right? Some were potentially open to that idea and thought that it could actually help to alleviate their labor issues because you suddenly have a new cadre of labor that you wouldn't otherwise have at those different points in the year. So on our staff side, those are some real challenges. And then for families, there's questions around childcare, things of that nature. I think from my perspective, I think that's the lesser of the challenges. And I know we didn't have a lot of parent feedback, but I did have the opportunity to see some of the parent interviews of the 4 or so parents that participated. And what the parents said is, well, if it's best for our kids, we'll figure it out. It's going to be a challenge, but we'll figure it out, which is good to hear. But again, we have 300 plus employees that we have to take into consideration as well. At some point, if we were to make this decision, folks at all levels would have to make a decision whether or not this is somewhere they would want to continue working. And for some of our folks, a balanced calendar would preclude them from wanting to continue to work here because of those real life issues that I just mentioned. And so we would lose some folks, folks that we probably don't want to lose for sure. But at the same time, it could also create an opportunity to gain some new folks who would be interested in working in a system with a balanced calendar. And it's for some people and it's not for others, right? So we have in the zone right now folks who've worked in other districts that have had a balanced calendar and they really like it and would be on board. And we've had folks that would say, I would leave the zone and go to one of the other districts. So it would, there would be pros and cons on both sides. And again, those things are not going to change. We have a limited budget. We're losing ESSER dollars. We're losing some grant funds. We just finished collective bargaining, so I can't go back and give all teachers an additional 20% raise to supplement what they would make in the summer. So if we were to make that decision, whether now, next year, or 2 years from now, those real life issues will still exist and folks will just have to make a hard choice.
Right, and I think that goes a little bit to my point about curiosity of gathering the data and the reason, because if we can work on those and continue to have these discussions with this focus group or as the next 6 to 9 months go along, ideally we get to a point a year from now where we don't have 43% of staff that say, no way. I'd feel a lot better if if we get more data, more families, but we get a data set that gives us a little more confidence that we have our people behind that decision. And I think the only way to do that is to continue to have the dialogue and listen and try to solve what we can solve so that it's a process. That's our best chance, I think.
Absolutely. In the little research I've done and talking to other superintendents who've done this, including at Beach Grove, down the road in south of Indy, that they've been doing this for 12 plus years. Just as we're having these conversations now, they had the same conversations, and they didn't have, as most other districts going into it, wide support. People grew to embrace it over time. So a decision was made, and then we just kind of get on board, and we, over time, we get used to it. So I don't know that we will ever, whether next year or 2 years from now, see any sort of data that shows 75% of staff are in favor and, X% of parents are in favor. I think it's one of those things where it's a tough decision, and we have to, as other board members have just mentioned, look at the cost loss analysis and swallow a tough pill and then deal with it as it comes.
I guess I would ask as well, are these perspectives, as it's listed here, are they informed perspectives, or are they based upon perception and potential of challenges? For example, have we looked at a district and said, they have the exact same concerns that you have, and this is how they overcame them? And I think there might be some value, again, you acknowledge that, because I think that the concerns are legitimate, and I think that, going into something new, it can be kind of scary, but overcomable. And if they can have the perspective that this challenge is overcomable because other communities similar to ours have done this, other districts similar to ours have done this, that might help inform their perspective. So that piece of data might be good.
And I do think, I'm sorry.
I'm interested in knowing how important the stakeholders' perspectives are, because of the number of stakeholders that we have data from, specifically families. There only being 4. And even with the staff, I just heard Dr. Lewis say over 300 plus staff, and we have 132 total, so less than half of staff. We have this on here, stakeholder perspective, so I would think that it would be an important data point. However, I don't know what procedures are being taken to make sure that we gather that information from the stakeholders. Did we just try one time to get the information from parents? I mean, I don't know what was done, but I do think that it is important for, like Dwayne said, one, for them to be informed so that they can make an informed decision, but 2, actually have an opportunity to provide some feedback on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I would remind board members as well that we went through this process last year. We actually had more parent and staff input last year. Last year, we did not do a committee that included staff. I personally went to every single school and had a town hall meeting with staff. And then there was a survey at the end of the town hall meeting. So we had a higher degree of staff input last year. And for the community at large, I think I did a total of 12 town hall meetings. All of them were live streamed. We had maybe about 200 or so plus people attend the various sessions in person. But I believe we had maybe like about 3,000 people who watched the dozen or so town halls virtually. So people watched and people were informed, and people did the surveys. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the feedback was more positive last year, in particular from staff last year. So we can certainly, this year we sent out surveys. Like I said, we put together a committee We were intentional with, who was on the committee. So we included folks on the committee that we knew were vehemently against it. And so we wanted to make sure that the space and opportunity for those perspectives to be shared. So we just didn't handpick people that were already, either on the fence or leaning towards. And the staff survey, I think, was out for a week, or somewhere around there. Parents, we asked principals and the facts in buildings to give us specific parents that we know would want to be involved in the process. And then we even had students do stakeholder interviews. I will say, looking through the data and the videos, et cetera, something that really resonated with me, one of the students at Navarre, who wasn't really necessarily opposed to it entirely, but in talking about real life impact, said, my parents are not together. And during the school year, I stay with parent A. During the summer is when I see parent B. And so if we change the schedule, then I have less time with parent B, who is out of state. And there's, I can't solve that, right? Those things are outside of my control. And that's the level of thoughtfulness our students put in the process when they were engaged. So, we did have some good, rich dialogue and feedback, and the committee watched the student interviews and watched the parent interviews, and they looked at all of the data. But again, at some point, we make a decision one way or another, and then we deal with the consequences of that decision. I think about when we made the decision in October to move to early dismissal on Thursdays and to implement a number of things that, going into those decisions, folks were kicking and screaming and saying, absolutely not. And, I was prepared for all staff to quit and for our enrollment to be cut by 50%. None of those things happened. And we kind of muddled our way through it. We didn't get it right at first. The first set of Thursday PDs weren't awesome. And the first set of, early dismissals, a few kids were still left behind and a few people got dropped off in the wrong place and that kind of stuff. But by the end of the year, people were like, this was a good decision. And coming back this year, it's like, that's their protected time. I know right now, if I were to say to staff, I'm taking away Thursday PD and we're gonna go back to a full day, they'd probably run me out of town. Because it's something that they've come to value, right? The majority of staff. So at some point you just make the decision and then you just figure it out as you go along. So it's up to the board. I just don't think you're ever gonna get 50% of staff saying we should do that.
I think that's why I asked the question, how important is this? Why put whoever through whatever to get their perspectives if it's not that important? Why are we doing it?
Oh, sorry.
It's not gonna, because that was the question. How important is this information? And if it's important information, we need more data. We need more people to participate.
So that I'm clear, their feedback and their input is important to me. There were a number of decisions that I made last year that did not really have as much input as we wanted, but that was last year because we were a level 5 trauma center. The patient was bleeding out. And when the patient's bleeding out, I don't have time to listen to 10 opinions. I need to stop the bleeding. And everybody just got to do what I tell them to do. The patient is now stabilized. Things have calmed down. So me just kind of making decisions on my own is no longer necessary, nor is it the right thing to do. And in retrospect, some of the decisions I made last year and the way I went about making them last year, I would have done differently. But when you are in a crisis and the patient is on the table bleeding out, you don't have time to consult 10 different people, right? So we have a patient that's now stabilized. All of our schools look and feel like schools. And when you take people into the buildings, they all say, oh my God, this is so different, right? So now we can have a process where we can bring more feedback and more people into decision making. And hopefully that continues. If we get back into a state of emergency, then the way I lead would be different again, but we're not in that state of emergency anymore. So the feedback that we got was valuable to me. And that's how I would want to make these type of big sweeping decisions moving forward.
And so maybe one of the things to help fill in here, I don't think this my mic's picking me up well here, but thinking about timeline moving forward and thinking about the motion, potential motion or motions from the board, right? So the recommendation from the committee is not to adopt a balanced calendar for this upcoming academic year and to stay with a more traditional calendar with some modifications, and that's on the screen. But to look at doing that for 25-26 academic year. So from maybe also speaking to the board here, right, for us to kind of think about and craft what our motion or motions would be. So the potential motion is for us to approve an academic calendar, which we have to do anyways for next year. And the proposal is a standardized calendar with some modifications. And then that the other either in the same motion, or we could do it separately, would be that we pursue a SIG grant, right? So it's a state improvement grant, and start an implementation year next year to look at implementing a balanced calendar for the following year. So I'm just kind of restating it.
A planning year for next year with elements infused, right, and implemented, but an implementation year that would be 25-26 as opposed to 24-25.
So a couple questions that aren't in this proposal for us to think about for next year. So I know like what the state requirement is on when we approve a calendar for the following year. When would we look at then the next big decision related to this would be when would we actually approve a balanced calendar if we did, right, for 25-26? What would that timeline look like? What date would that be?
I would say if you're going to do that, you want to do that by January 25. If we want to do that to get it implemented in 25-26, you'd have to make that decision January 25. School systems typically will recommend their calendar for the upcoming year, February, March. You don't want to do it later than April. But if we were to commit to doing a balanced calendar, assuming I can predict how board members would vote, for such a big decision, you would want to do it no later than January 25 so that you can have the runway to get things started.
That was framed because normally in March we approve a fall calendar. So if we were to make this change, then we're committing to continue to explore. We're committing that we're going to apply for a SIG grant that would include the thoughts about having a balanced calendar. And then that puts us on a shot clock per se to have it ready by January. Questions related to that?
I do. So for 24-25, the second part of that says, under the balance or pursuing an improvement grant, and then in 24-25 planning year, and then it said the zone would try elements of a balanced calendar. Is that something we would vote on, not knowing what those elements are? Is that just they can try whatever, or how does that work? How do we know what's going to be tried and what that looks like and that type of thing?
So we haven't fully fleshed it out, but some thoughts that I have, for example, I know I've considered having extended school during winter break as an example, right? Some of our staff don't travel and they're happy to have opportunities for extra income. Some of our students need the additional support. So doing that over the 2-week break, as an example, during a balanced calendar, you have these intermittent 2 or 3 week breaks. So that's a 2-week break that's scheduled where we could see if this could work, right? So that's something that's an element of a balanced calendar that we could try. For the following summer, we could play around with the timing of summer school as well. So right now we do summer school. Summer school for this upcoming school year is slated to begin June 5th. So it's that Wednesday and end June 28th. So we could look at, as opposed to doing what we've typically done, which is summer school, 1 session in the summer, we could do 2 sessions, right? Which I'm sure Boys and Girls Club would be happy because they do 2 summer camp sessions. So we could, as we do in June, have kids for academic school in the morning time, and then they transition to Boys and Girls Club for enrichment in the afternoon, and we do that 2 sessions as opposed to 1. So that would be an opportunity for staff and students and parents to see what that would feel like to be in school, both, even though it's part-time, for June and July as an optional. So those are like 2 things that I can share right now off the top of my head as some elements that we could try next year. The other thing we could look at, because a part of the idea in terms of balanced calendar would be during the intermittent break is to have the building open to community partners so that for families who have issues with childcare, there's this optional, okay, well, we have, community in school, we have YMCA, Boys and Girls, whoever is in the building that's running camp for parents who want kids to be out of the home during these intermittent breaks. So our building is fully shut down during that Thanksgiving break week. Is that an opportunity to pilot to see if we ran a day program that's optional, how many parents and families would avail themselves of that opportunity to then inform if that's something that we could do legitimately if we had a balanced calendar. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about that we could pilot in 24-25 to see what the response is. Does that answer your question?
When is a vote take place on something like this?
The board, I would strongly encourage the board to make a vote today.
Yeah, so for clarification, is this potential change or potential adoption contingent on the SIG grant? Because if we don't get the grant, then what? Are we still committed to balanced calendar or no?
I think it depends on how you word the motion. For context, the SIG grant is due May. And we would find out in June. The IDOE is visiting us as a zone, I think the 2nd or 3rd week in April. And the committee from IDOE that's coming to visit, this is something I plan to get their feedback on and see if it is at least from their perspective, a worthwhile endeavor in terms of funding for a SIG grant. So it depends on how you word the motion. If you word the motion that we only pursue this if we get the SIG grant, then that's what we'll do. But if you word the motion that we do it regardless of whether or not we get the SIG grant, then we're bound by whatever motion is adopted.
The other piece though, and that's part of why I asked logistically about calendar approval is based on, depending what and how we vote tonight, if we vote to do, let me just say, as it's kind of outlined here, either way, in January of 25, we would have to vote to then implement a balanced calendar, right? So what we're saying we would implement it in that year, but we still, by state requirement, have to once a year vote on the school calendar, which we would have to do next year to approve that. So I think that also there's some weight to what we're doing here to give staff the ability and focus to work on a SIG grant, to work on implementation, to do some trial pieces, but that we ultimately would have a date in the future, and we would continue to every year have to vote a calendar for each year, like we have to do. So today, either way, we have to vote on a calendar for next year, but that sometime in the future, we're going to have to officially vote to implement a balanced calendar.
If you were to word the motion in such a way that we explore the balanced calendar if we get the SIG grant, right? And that is the motion that is passed. If we find out in June that we don't get the SIG grant, then it's a moot point and we wouldn't have to go through the process of trying to implement bits and pieces during the 24-25 year. So then you come back in January 2025, kind of by default, a balanced calendar is not on the table unless you want us to pursue it, having not piloting any bits and pieces of it. Does that help?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. How without the SIG grant, I mean, how feasible from a cost perspective? I mean, that's the part I'm trying to think through. Is it seems difficult to put together what's the cost around when the tough part for me is elements like I'm not exactly sure what that all is going to entail. I'll honestly say, I think if it's a good idea, then we go full bore into it next year. This whole concept of try a few things, it's almost as if, well, we're gonna put some families in some spots where there isn't a whole lot of certainty. We're gonna do a few things. And it's almost like you're trying to adjust your life a little bit for some things. I would almost rather, and not knowing what you're gonna do, not that I don't trust you, but those are some of the questions I have on this concept of partial implementation.
On the question of the SIG grant, it, at least from my perspective, it's less about whether or not we can do this without a SIG grant, because we can do this without a SIG grant. A SIG grant is a part of the conversation because in order to have a viable application for a SIG grant, you have to be doing something different, and there needs to be some innovation that's a part of it, right? And so being able to put together a strong application that here is some innovation that we're doing as a zone is why the SIG grant comes on the table. Now, by no means am I negating the funds that would come with a SIG grant and how beneficial that would be for us, but that's the correlation there. As to your second comment, I do agree with you that, you know, we either just do it or we don't. For what it's worth, my thought is that if this is something that the board is interested in doing, that for 24-25, we keep the current calendar and commit to doing it for 25-26. So then students, families, staff, they're not getting a 4-month runway. They're getting a runway of 1.5 years for us to all make the commitment to work on some of these issues. So when we come back in January 25, it's not a matter of whether or not we are adopting a balanced calendar. We're doing it formally because we're required to do it each year. So that's what I would recommend, is that we keep the calendar as is for 24-25 and then bind us to implementing this in 25-26. So we would then spend 24-25 trying to figure out these various issues, working on it for 1.5 years. So we're ready to go in August of 25. I also think that's a compromise, and everybody gets a little bit of what they want.
I have a question. Do you have to vote on both of them together as a package deal, or can you vote on 24-25 and then vote on 25-26? Although I just heard the board president say that 25-26 would have to be voted on anyways in January.
Yes, but so to my earlier point, it's a formality. I would not recommend that we go down the road of trying to explore this and then we get to January 25 and then say we don't do it. So, you know, we would have all wasted the first semester with tinkering and trying to figure out, is this something that we can do in 25-26? As to the vote, it comes down to whoever makes the motion, how you word it. So you can do it as 2 separate motions or as one. In a former life, I was a parliamentarian, so.
Any additional questions for staff before we make a motion? And then once we have a motion on the floor, then we would take public comment related to the motion before we vote.
Maybe take public comment prior to the motion. Yeah, the public comment will inform.
Discussion, but then we'll discuss again after public comment. Okay, then we will move to that. I can read the policy again. I'm assuming there's some folks that have been squirming in some chairs and want to say some things about this, and so we'll give the quick, where did my sheet go? But please feel free to come up for public comment if you plan to make a public comment. The couple highlights I will mention is keep the public comment related to the item that is on the agenda, and that's our academic calendar. And then you get 3 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record before you start. And no personnel items. There are people that signed up to speak. Yeah, so you just come on up. There's a microphone and a podium. Yeah, if you're not, sorry, also semantics. If you've never been here before, if you're going to speak tonight, you can line up at the podium here, or you can wait until the previous speaker's done and then you can step up. But so we will start that portion here. And I'm getting my money's worth out of my iPhone here and getting the timer started. You can go ahead and start, please.
Okay, my name is Angela Pedraza, and my address is 19157 Edinburgh Drive. I work for the zone, and I am very proud to work for the zone. I have loved the zone since the beginning to now. All the changes we've made, all the support as teachers we felt we have had, and the support for families. One of the things I initially liked about the zone that I still continue to see is that surveys are sent to parents, surveys are sent to staff, and those things are taken into consideration. And when they work, we go forward. If we go forward with something and it doesn't work, they pull back. I love the respect that we have had in the empowerment zone and all of the changes we have had to make things better for our students. I am very concerned about the balanced calendar because I'm not sure that we are the same as other districts that have tried it. Because when you say another district has tried it, that's a district, a community. We're a split community, and that's a huge problem. We don't have a zone high school. So if parents are planning vacation, childcare, whatever they're planning, their children are split, so your family is split. Imagine that for yourself, not being able to plan anything because some of your kids are here and some of your kids are there. Some of us teachers, our kids are in the corporation. And I see, because we are a split district, that our families will suffer because it splits our family time, splits who cares for our children, which I love the things that you're talking about implementing, but sometimes there are other things like family experiences. I love the story about the child who needs that time with their dad. Those are basic needs. And if basic needs aren't met, then educational gains, that means nothing to me. And I'm an educator, and I'm serious about education, but if basic needs aren't met, education is secondary to that. And then our community, because as a district, the majority of people are in the court. So our whole community and all the community services, church camps, all these things are set up to follow the district, not the zone. So however meaningful the changes are that the zone will bring, right now it's splitting families. If somehow in this time period, we could try to bring the corp in as well, we can't be divided when it comes to families.
About 30 seconds.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker. I thought we had a few signed up. This one was just one. Oh, I thought we had a couple that were signed up. Okay. All right, so then back to board conversation, closed comment.
I think I'd like to make a motion. There's another comment. I'd like to treat these as two separate things. So I would make a motion that we defer implementation is the first motion. And the second would be, I'm not ready to decide tonight on what we should do yet in the following year. I think I need more information. So I guess for the second motion I would make is that we continue to consider aspects of the plan, obtain more information, consider adopting. I'll retract my other spot and say I would be open to looking at some elements to prepare for potentially implementing in 25-26.
Can I ask
One motion, and maybe just wanted to clarify, because there's two things we need to do. So we're gonna first discuss, So you're wanting a first motion about balanced calendar and long-term, and we'll circle back on approving calendar for next year, right, in a second.
I think, and not to paraphrase, but I think what I heard though is,
Clean it up, basically.
maybe the first one, so what's on the agenda is the school calendar. And so I think what you're saying is, let's adopt the traditional school calendar as part of your
Yes.
first motion.
Yes.
And then the second was related to maybe the continued study or something like that. Just more clarity, yes.
Yes, that's where it's going. If I
Sorry.
misspoke, I apologize, yeah.
So that if we do that as two motions, then let's just break out the first one, which is adopting the proposed calendar for next year, which is mostly an as-is calendar,
Called traditional.
a traditional
Yeah.
school calendar for the 24-25 academic year. So that,
That would be the motion,
the first motion.
yes.
And I'll entertain a second.
Ball second.
Paul seconds that. Thank you. All right, discussion on that motion. By and large, right? So I will call the question. All in favor of approving the 24-25 academic calendar as presented in the plan? All opposed? Clarifying
You
question.
said as presented in the plan, what does that mean?
Well, as the
The traditional calendar.
The traditional calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Okay,
so you're,
I'm a yes for the traditional
Okay.
calendar.
okay, so then that motion passes unanimously. So then the second motion, you had started making two motions, so then the
Yeah.
second part of that was.
The second motion would be that we continue to explore the pros and cons of a balanced calendar with a consideration in January 2025 of adopting a balanced calendar.
I'll second.
Oh, I had a question.
Yes, yep.
So my question is,
Discussion on the motion that's on the floor, yeah.
okay, great, okay, so, it says it's contingent upon the SIG grant. So my question is, if we're going to, what's the timeline for the SIG grant? What other innovative things that are gonna go in addition to the balanced calendar? Sorry. But I think that's important to know, because if we're relying upon the applet, well, if we need that to do that, or are there other things, can we apply it? And then if we say no, then what do we do with the grant? Are we bound by the grant?
Okay, so multi-part question. So first part of that is, it does not, us doing a balanced calendar does not have to be contingent on the SIG grant. So we can do a balanced calendar with or without the SIG grant. Your question around the mechanics of the SIG grant is the application due in May, and I believe we would find out in June. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. The third question around the SIG grant, we are planning to pursue the SIG grant regardless of what we do with the balanced calendar. The theme of the SIG grant is kind of like putting the cart before the horse here, but the theme around the SIG grant is redesigning the way we do school. So we're considering we plan to put in the SIG grant a number of elements, including a balanced calendar, including doing an AB schedule. So having extended opportunities. So attendance is an issue, truancy is an issue. I am not, a lot of people seem to think that the way to improve attendance is to involve the criminal justice system and child services. I am opposed to criminalizing folks for truancy. I think what you do is you expand opportunities for how kids can attend school, both days and time. So that's a part of the grant. As a part of the grant as well, we're looking at a different staffing model. One in part to address teacher shortages, but also to decrease teacher burnout and increase teacher retention. So we're looking as in that kind of grand theme of redesigning school or reimagining school, moving to a team teaching structure as a part of that. in an effort to try to reduce some behavior issues. We're also looking at doing a school within a school model. So there's a differentiated type of schedule and structure for students who would otherwise be expelled or receive long-term out-of-school suspension. So, I certainly don't want to give all the details of the different things, but we're working on this large grant that is really about reimagining the way we do school. And those are some of the components that we plan to put in that grant application.
And to clarify too, Mr. Wilson, so I specifically excluded the whole SIG grant thing out of my motion because I heard earlier that financially, we could still pull off some things we want to try without that. So I appreciate that question though, but I was purposeful in not including that.
And my only other thought, I think just being from the committee, this extra time is helpful, I think, in terms of data and stuff as we talked. Also, I think there was some desire amongst teachers and other administrative personnel to talk to some of their peers in these other communities and such. So you only throw some of the timing out there to think January at the latest, probably. I think like this has to be a priority discussion for the fall of 24 with the idea that at our December or January meeting at the latest, we probably make a decision on this. And so I think the time frame is right. I just more think just from the time frame, I think what we heard from those participants in the committee was a little time to help ask those questions would be helpful to them.
One thing we want to do in the fall that we have not done as a part of this process, I think it would be helpful when possible. So maybe on one of the teacher prep days where we're getting on a bus and we're driving down to Beach Grove to see it in action, or we're driving down to some other district that's close by. Because to your question around perception and like what are perceived challenges, again, you won't know until you see it and you feel it. And so like even going to another district and talking to those teachers, talking to those parents, talking to those staff, and seeing how it runs might still not assuage all the concerns, but that is a part of the process that we would want to include in this next step that we haven't had the opportunity to do last year or as a part of this process.
So maybe again, you want me to again kind of state what's out there?
Sure.
Let's see if I can do it the same. Did somebody take notes? So I would motion that we table any implementation of a balanced calendar at this point until a decision by January at the latest for the 25-26 school year. But that we also continue to explore how this would work.
And I'd say,
All right, with that, any additional questions, comments related? And then I will call the question. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No, there was opposition, no abstentions. So that passes unanimously, I think, correct? Right, yeah. We're a little, just want to make sure. Okay, so thank you. Now I moved all my sheets around and I gotta find. Okay, so next up on is our focus reports. So under focus reports, we are at innovative pathways for academic enrichment. And set the name and address for the record and take it away.
All right, my name, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the board, my name is Seth Moss. I'm the president of 5 Star Life. My address is 17123 Killarney Court, Granger. Also have some more guests joining us. Welcome. I'll kick it off. So I want to show you just a quick video because I want you to kind of see some visuals of this innovative learning program that we've launched with Navarre that actually we just completed last Friday.
Have a vision, so every time, like, when they like have vision, I like write something that I had a vision to do at Navarre, like for like my schoolwork and stuff. So like that.
Learning is hard and they have a hard time doing hard. But what if we could open up our 350-acre training center at Summit and we could align our programs to educational standards? What if we could do school the old-fashioned way? Experiential, kinesthetic, hands-on. Since we know research says that 85% of us learn best by seeing visually or by doing, right? So this plays right into the hand of research and to how kids learn the best.
Like what Coach says, you have to use a vision to make, we're trying to get to your goals.
I've heard it said that, competence creates confidence. Our goal is that kids starting in 5th grade, and then 6th grade, and 7th grade, 8th grade, but over the course of those 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to learn so many skills, some that they maybe don't like as much as others, some they have an affinity for and they love it, that they can then make really good decisions about what high school they attend so they can dive into that.
Just be brave. Like how like the horses, I was like a little like, I don't know. But like then I just like grabbed myself like I could do this and I love the horse.
This is 5-Star Life Innovative Learning. We're so excited about it. This is year number 1. We're so grateful that you're on board, supporting, engaged in the process.
So 5-Star Life Innovative Learning was birthed really by a series of listening sessions with local seasoned veteran administrators who just looked at a sequence of years where test scores were going down, where behavioral issues were going up, where truancy was going up. So by listening to that, we said, what if we took our 350-acre property and all the programs that we have and aligned them to Department of Education standards, where we then aligned it with our own 5-Star Life curriculum, and then added skill building so that we know 85% of kids learn better when they're seeing, when they're doing, when it's hands-on experiential. And so this program is born 6 weeks, every Friday they come out for the school day. And let's start with our 5-Star Life curriculum. Every week they spent 6 weeks. The first part was our own curriculum, where it was focused on helping them break through in motivation. That's what we've heard from parents, teachers, like just kids don't have motivation to show up, to sit in the seat, to learn. They come to socialize, they come to do those things, but they don't want to learn. And so every lesson, let's start with a vision. Why are kids not motivated to learn? Because they have no vision. When you have a vision of where you want to go, you have something to get up for, that creates motivation. Then when you set goals, actionable steps to get there, you're motivated. When you believe it, and then when you actually take action, you create this path of learning and growing experientially. And then when you think about the people in your life that you're surrounded by, the relationships, are you surrounded with people that have vision or people that don't have vision? So that was kind of curriculum-wise what we walked through. And then we walked them through 3 different courses. There was the next slide there. So the first class was a nature education course where they studied entomology, they did hatchet throwing, and they did archery. And these kids were incredible. Here's just a few stats. I have 8 pages of metrics and standards. I will just share like 30 seconds of highlights. 100% of the participants, let's see here, 100% of the participants could demonstrate the correct steps of hatchet throwing. 100% of participants could demonstrate the basic steps of the shot sequence while shooting a bow as determined by the USA Archery. So that's the group that certifies kids for the Junior Olympics. So they're gaining a skill that could get them college scholarships. We then had a health education course. We partnered with Beacon Health. So the nurse teachers for Beacon Health came out and worked with kids for 6 weeks. Basic first aid, how to stop the bleed, and then CPR. And every kid finished with a CPR certification. And everywhere I went, I would ask kids from Navarre, if I just like fell over and stopped breathing, could you bring me back? And every kid just instantly with counseling. I could do that, Coach Seth. I could bring you back. I'm like, okay, that's what I want to hear. Some quick stats on the health side. 100% of those participants were able to demonstrate mastery of proper CPR administration technique and practices. That's a big deal. 100% of students were able to communicate the solutions of a problem analysis either orally, visually, or in writing, including process steps, findings, or conclusions when determining how to act in the CPR certification. That's a really big deal for our kids. That's a real skill. And then we had an equine course that was really all things farm animals and animal science. And for those metrics, 98% of the participants said it was their first time ever taking a beginner horse riding mastery course. 75% of participants were able to demonstrate an understanding of the basic anatomy and physiology of a horse and of other barn animals and how to treat or care for animal health. And then thirdly, 75% of kids were able to use models to describe the energy in animals' food used for body repair, growth, motion, and to maintain body warmth. That was once in the form of energy from the sun. Pretty cool stuff. So we were honored to partner with Navarre and Mr. Harris, an incredible teaching staff. It was a great 6-week run. I will end my comments and turn to them after saying this. The goal is to start with 6th grade and then scale it to 6th and 7th graders and then into 8th graders, so that these kids will get layer upon layer of skill building, not just in these areas, but in other areas like blacksmithing, woodworking, so that as they move forward, they can choose pathways for what high school to go to and even build skills for things like the Career Center. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Harris.
Was it me? So, this was it's been a journey. It's been a journey. It's been 7 Fridays, 6 Fridays, and I was at 5 of those 6 Fridays. And I'll just say, imagine taking kids out of the building, out of the mortar, out of the chairs, and imagine what happens. I really need this. Jesus Christ. So just imagine taking kids out of the building, the mortar, the chairs, and taking them outside in nature and watching them do some things that they would probably, I'm going to say 98% of them, like he said, was their first time being in that type of environment. And probably 75 to 85% of them probably never been in that environment again. And I think that is an awesome thing that our students had the opportunity to do that, because they probably wouldn't do that otherwise. And it was awesome watching students absolutely terrified of horses. To at the end of 6 weeks, they were on the horses. I think all of them. I think we only had about 3 or 4 that opt out, and all the rest of them was on the horse. They did it by themselves. They rode around the arena by themselves, and I thought that was awesome. So, just to give a few statistics, so our kids don't like coming to school on Friday, and that's just I think that's a thing around America. But guess what happened on Friday for 6th grade? Friday on 6th grade, now I'm just letting y'all know, teachers don't mind when kids don't come to school on Friday. They be all right. Trust me, they didn't go. But not 6th grade, because 6th grade, their attendance increased. Normally we have about 85% of our kids at school, and that's 7th, 6th, and 8th grade. But during this time period, we went from 85% in 6th grade to 97% in 6th grade. That was the attendance increase. So in behavior logs, our behavior logs on Thursday for the Thursday right after it, and the previous Thursday, we probably have about 27 log entries for the 6th grade. And the log entries the day before, the Thursday before the 6 times they went to 5-star, it was only 10 log entries. And those 10 log entries was probably the 10 kids that wasn't going anyway. And so, for better or for worse, I think that this opportunity, and I am privileged to have been with them during this time, And I think we oftentimes forget the holistic approach to education, and our kids can learn outside of the classroom and do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, especially kids that live in the community in which we serve. I'm sure they'll, other than Seth and his crew being a part of this for the next 2 or 3 years, they will probably never experience this again. And I wanted to say about this has nothing to do with anything with the balanced calendar. So in the balanced calendar in the state of Louisiana, obviously they went to this out of necessity because of Katrina, and the academics increased. Somebody asked how much the academics increased. They increased by 27% in 3 years. And I am not for or against the balanced calendar, but in a school in Louisiana, they have both. They have 2 programs operating in the same building. They have a balanced calendar outside, and they have a traditional calendar side. Just a thought. SBEZ. Thank you, Lord. Yeah, you
All right, good evening to everyone.
Oh, Jesus.
I am the parent of Paloma Espinosa. I work at Navarre Middle School as a front office secretary, attendance secretary. My student attends Navarre Middle School. She's a 6th grader. I have nothing but positive things to say about the 5-Star Academy. She loved it. She would come home. I would be like, at dinner time, Paloma, what you do today? We rode on the horses. We went on hikes. We threw axes. We learned CPR. I know how to do CPR on a baby. She was showing me with the little 2 fingers on the chest and everything. She came home with her little certificate and she got certified. All the 6th graders loved it. Those 6th graders were on time, on cue, every day before the buses left them. They would show up on time. These kids were so happy to go. And it was a good experience for the kids. And it would be nice, like, you know, if the rest of the grades would be able to experience what the 6th graders experience. There was nothing but positivity coming from those 6th graders for those 6 weeks that they attended the 5-Star Academy.
I want to hear about jumping on the horse the first time.
You just like being on the horses. Barn cats, the barn cats that I argue with. She's a little shy, but she said she really liked the horseback riding. She fell in love with the barn cats also, the hikes and all that. So it was an amazing experience for the 6th graders.
Thank you. One more.
I'm bringing up the rear here. So my name is Amber Dietz. I've taught at Navarre Middle School for 4 years now. I had the privilege of attending. I went on 5 of the trips. One of them I wasn't feeling good, so I stayed back with our 6th graders. I got to see their personalities outside of the classroom. Like I said, I've taught math and science, so we haven't had a lot of field trip experiences. I had some health problems, so I had to stay back on a lot of them. So I got to watch them, like they all said, hands-on activities, horses, the CPR. They had different teamworks. The 5-Star, the horses, they've already read about, they've all talked about MC. The first aid, they provide the basic skills to help the adults and children. Compressions, they had their CPR certifications. I've had a couple students who were quiet all year, like they were the really quiet, closed 6th graders who haven't opened up. I'm sitting down there one day, I went to the barn and I'm watching her covered in horsehair. And I'm like, she's just sitting there brushing the horses and then telling me all about how she has experienced it with horses at home. And the same with I found it funny, one of my boy students was sitting there playing with one of the barn cats. He goes, my mom says I'm allergic to cats, but I don't believe her. And like, he's like all in this cat. I go, this is where we are right now. Like, we're gonna have to use some of this first aid with this. Like, he's just covered in cat hair. I go, I don't even want to respond to this right now. So they went out there, they came back with these fun nature kits. I had to get one from, like, they had like the nets, like they came back with kits. And I didn't know this, like the garden insects of the Midwest, like they came back with these books and they came back with like a first aid kit. Like, this whole bag is all first aid stuff. Like, I'm like, I am so jealous of their first aid kit. Like, I'm like, I wish we got this first aid kit. Like, I'm sitting there going, what? I don't know where you're all going, but this is like, they came back with like surgical scissors. Like I said, I saw a different side of the students. They saw a different side of the teachers. Like, I went on the horseback riding. There was one where you walked the ponies and it was red light, green light. We had that. They saw us, walked in there, red light, green light with the ponies. They watched us on me ride a horse. I did the bow and arrow with the students. They didn't see us normally in that kind of different place as educators. So I would be going to different groups or different areas, and all I would hear is, Miss Dietz, look at what we're doing. Miss Dietz, they were excited for us to see what they were doing. So, and that's what made it worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
One, just thank you, Seth, for the good work you do in our community, different schools. Can you just, for some of us who aren't as familiar with 5-Star, we've worked together for 19 plus years, but help us understand just, one, grateful that you have Navarro out there, but how many school corporations, how many kids? Give us some of the big picture 5-Star, how you serve the community.
Yeah, so we work with schools from Michigan to Florida. So Beech Grove, school partner of ours. I know the middle school principal well was just down there doing a session, do PD down there. So we work with tens of thousands of kids in Michigan and across the nation. But this is our backyard, and so this is our priority. So just sitting here listening, very excited about some of the things you're doing. I think there's more we can do. We want to go a little deeper with Navarre specifically. But yeah, video curriculum program that schools are using. Then we have this innovative learning program we have. Then we also serve local detention centers, work with kids on probation. So we train all the JJC staff, clinicians, POs, Elkhart County, same thing. And then we started a diversion program that probably a good conversation piece for Navarre as well, at looking at truancy issues. We've had an 87% success rate at diverting kids from the system. So that's starting to get traction here across Michigan and the state. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question, Paloma. Sounds like you learned a lot of things, and you can have your mom answer for you if you want to. I would love to know, of all the things you learned, what is the thing that you're most proud of that you learned that you thought you maybe couldn't do or wouldn't do?
No, into the mic. You got it.
Maybe it's speaking into the mic tonight.
Learning how to ride a horse.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I have a 6th grader as well, and I don't think she would talk either. So it's okay.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the hard work, and look forward to continued partnership.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Navarre team. Thank you, Paloma.
Next up is systematic use of data or services. So,
Hello, yes, we're going to be talking about data, hopefully in an engaging way, and letting you know a little bit about what we've been doing with data in the zone this past year. A key priority for us, if you recall last year at the State of the Zone, was to really focus on and look at a coherent set of data practices and a way of engaging with data that is systematic across schools with the central office, but looking at data in ways that are most definitely systematic and consistent and connected. And so we are going to talk a little bit about where we are now based on some of the work we've done, but first have a couple of little clips.
What's better, clean or messy?
Clean. I I like messy because I think when it's clean, I think it's naked.
Have you ever heard of a thing called a firewall?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's a firewall?
It's a wall that's on fire.
Okay, good. Yeah. When you're at home, do you guys ask your parents a lot of questions?
But people in my classroom, including my teacher, I talk a ton is what people say. So it's probably yes. Or can be.
How many friends did you have last year?
20.
20. Okay, how about for you?
35.
35. How about you?
About 2.
So we can talk about data, we can talk numbers, and one of the things that we really wanted to focus on is what happens after those conversations. Here's another brief clip.
Right here, I'm projecting that we're doing at least 99 games going into the postseason. We need to score at least 814 runs in order to win those games and allow no more than 645 runs. What's this? This is the code that I've written for our year-to-year projections. This is building in all the intelligence that we have to project players. Okay. It's about getting things down to one number. Using stats the way we read them, we'll find value in players that nobody else can see. People are overlooked for a variety of biased reasons and perceived flaws. Age, appearance, personality. Bill James and mathematics cut straight through them. Billy, of the 20,000 notable players for us to consider, I believe that there is a championship team of 25 people that we can afford. Because everyone else in baseball undervalues them. Like an island of misfit toys. Billy, this is Chad Bradford. He's a relief pitcher. He's one of the most undervalued players in baseball. His defect is that he throws funny. Nobody in the big leagues cares about him because he looks funny. This guy could be not just the best pitcher in our bullpen, but one of the most effective relief pitchers in all baseball. This guy should cost $2 million a year. We can get him for $237,000.
So the use of data to make decisions and to transform outcomes really requires taking action and taking the data from organizing it, systematizing it, reviewing it, and definitely aligning it to other practices. Our evidence-based school effectiveness framework is really the map or the anchor that for this year really ties those things together, our data practices together, in terms of aligning how we engage with data. We'll be talking a little bit more about some details in this framework at the next board meeting. But really focusing very specifically on how that framework ties to what we're doing with school improvement planning, looking at data to engage in the development of a school improvement plan, looking at survey data to determine what we're doing in the schools and connecting everything again back to the data and the framework. We're going to go over a few practices or I guess systems that we've put into place where our data practices have been developed in a cohesive way for this school year. Again, everything very much anchored in the evidence-based school effectiveness framework that we're using. The first thing would be the school improvement plan. The school improvement plan is a document that has sometimes been used to develop and submit to the state. And what we've really worked on is not only using data to inform what's in there, but also ensuring that it's alive and it's used throughout the year, that we're taking a look at it, and just yesterday we had the opportunity to do so. Our quarterly leadership data days is something new for this year, very intentionally. At the end of each quarter, or let's say at the beginning of the new quarter, on teacher preparation days, we have convened our leaders, our school leadership teams, to engage in data conversations, data discussions, data processes, and informing action through that. So just yesterday, we had a data day with our school leadership teams. They engaged in looking at some data, professional learning data, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, and really engaging in a process that we've been layering since October at our first quarterly leadership data day, where we were talking about data walls. We were identifying themes and insights in our academic data. In January, after our quarter two, we engaged our leadership teams again in conversations and looking at data, engaging in what insights might be coming out of the data, what patterns are there, what are some opportunities that they have, and even brainstorming some small strategies or small bets to implement in their schools. Again, taking action from the data. Just yesterday, we engaged them in what is our evaluation of professional learning data. This year, our early release or early dismissal data is very much a building level decision based on the data, the needs of the staff at their school, based on the student data that they have. And what we've done is provided an exit ticket, a survey, so there's data collection. That data is organized by us and then provided back to the leadership teams so they can look at their data from the exit tickets that staff are responding to and inform any changes. See what is working, see what might not be working, and make changes based on the information, the data that they receive. I'm going to just show a brief example of 3 data points that are some really brief or quick insights for them. One of them is the response rate. What is the engagement of staff in completing the exit tickets? How much information are you getting from your staff in terms of completion of the survey? So they can see that in the staff engagement. They can look at the relevance. There's a question related to, is this relevant to my role? Was the professional development provided that I engaged in relevant to my role? And they can take a look at that information as the second insight. And the third one is they're asked to respond to what are they going to do next? What can you take from this professional development, this professional learning experience, and implement tomorrow in the classroom? So they can take a look again at, did their professional development, was it perceived as relevant to their staff? And were people ready to take action in the classroom or in their roles after the professional development? Another area where systematic data practices are very much tied to the school effectiveness framework, but also are being addressed at the school level is with our MTSS. And I know we've talked about MTSS and the triangle, whether it be MTSS for academics or looking at behavioral issues. Data informs who needs support beyond what's happening for all kids in the core instruction or in the core universal classrooms. And then what does the intervention or that support, what is it doing to improve the students' academic skill or behavioral concern? So data is being used and is really the motor for the MTSS process. Last, I'd like to share a little bit about early warning system. An early warning system has been around for quite a while. Sometimes they're called student success systems. And it started really in secondary with high school and is evidence-based, but 1 out of every 5 students don't complete high school. And so using data to take a look at who is in most need and identify what supports are needed and who might no longer need that level of intense support is an important part of the looking at data. We have very different systems for middle school as we might for elementary, but real quick, a large national sample of 8th grade students were asked if they would be graduating or saw themselves graduating in 4 years. And 98% of them said that they would be. As you can see, no longer animated, but 60% of students by the beginning of 9th grade or by the end of the first semester in 9th grade felt same students, same kiddos, a semester to high school, only 60% instead of 98% felt that they could graduate within the 4 years. So early warning systems kind of grew out of that in response to wanting to identify and be able to support and kind of change the pathway or the trajectory of kids that are off track related to credits, graduation requirements, grades and attendance, but really looking at the levels and intensity of like disengaging from school. That has been researched downward into middle school. And specifically, 2 areas that really stand out are looking at attendance and course performance. So it's not about what kids know in middle school, the research would show when you look at longitudinally, if those students graduate, it's about how they're performing, not necessarily what they've achieved or attained in terms of skill, but how they perform. So grades is a really strong predictor in an early warning system. Attendance is as well. And so the percentage, although even higher than what we would define chronic absenteeism as, is a flag at 20%, hitting a threshold of this is a student that is disengaging and is not necessarily where we want them to be, but we're creating this early warning system to be able to flag that early enough. So really not very different than looking at stats. Teams at schools can actually take this information and really take the evidence to collect and analyze data, assess supports if they're working or not, identify the students that are in most need. I kind of think about it as the students on life support, who are the students that you need to know all the time, every day, how they're doing and monitoring their progress, and be able to really monitor the implementation of the support strategies for them. What that looks like is actually calculating and taking into account academics, attendance, and behavior. Like we mentioned, for middle school, academics is looked at through grades and performance as opposed to skill. And then those pieces of information, based on where the student is at, how many Fs they might have, their attendance, is put into an at-risk coefficient score. So it's really just a composite score of those 3 areas to see how at-risk students are. And in the next slide, you can see, for example, what that might look like for a group of students in middle school, and teams can actually filter the students with the red, right? And the shades of red towards pink to be able to see what they're doing and how many students are in each of those groups to allocate the resources and the supports that they might need. This is updated every 2 weeks and is something that has been provided to all of the teams. Go to the next one. Elementary is just a little bit different in terms of the academics being tied to their actual achievement or attainment of skill as opposed to their performance. It's not grades, but instead we're looking at iReady data. There's less evidence-based and research on the elementary, but we do know how important, for example, reading is. So we're looking at adding iRead 3 in here as well. Early warning system is not meant to be something completely different, completely out there as an initiative on its own. It's a tool that really fits and aligns with MTSS and a multi-tiered system of supports. So it puts faces on the data, but ties to promotion in doubt and other MTSS processes in the school. One of the things we've asked teams to do is to take a look at the students that they have that are identified as promotion in doubt, and take a look at the early warning system data and see what kind of matches are they seeing. Are they picking up the students in the promotion in doubt that the data shows are being flagged with some concerns that need intensive or supplemental supports? That is the system, various systems of practices that we have connected to and anchored in our evidence-based school effectiveness framework to use the data beyond beyond organizing it and talking about it, but instead making sure that it turns into action.
Any questions?
Roxanne,
I think you guys told me you know.
Can you walk through this, I'm sort of interested in how this works a little bit. I understand the data piece, but you mentioned like these teams, like who's on the team, how often are they meeting, sort of when this grabs their attention, and then sort of like what the action, just like make it real, like little Jeff has started to fall behind, help us understand that process.
Yes, that's a great, so each team is built out a little bit differently. Some have an MTSS coordinator, but in general, it is the leadership team that is going to be looking at this with a cadence maybe of weekly, bi-weekly. And they're identifying the promotion and doubt students with teachers, so that's not necessarily happening at the meeting. Schools have a multi-tiered system of supports process. That happens, for example, at one school where a leader, coordinator of MTSS meets with grade level PLCs. So the grade level teachers meet with that person and they go over and identify students that might need some additional supports. They talk about those students, where they are, what might be causing the issues, and then provide them with supports. Some of those supports are baked into, let's say, an intervention block and a calendar or schedule where the students are getting the supports right in the classroom. In some cases, some students are pulled out to be seen with the intervention teacher, and then progress monitoring or data is collected, brief pieces of data that every month they can look at and say, how's the student doing? Is it working? Is the student improving? If not, problem solving that. So that can happen in some schools with a grade level team and somebody coordinating that. But by all means, the leadership team is having that conversation, kind of looking from the balcony at all of the levels and all of the students' data. Does that help a little?
Yeah.
Is there a way that some of the early warning data, are we doing this, and or is there a way we could do this if we're not? Shared with partner organizations, so thinking about additional nonprofits, right? Like, so Seth is still here, or there's a great nonprofit community here in South Bend. Thinking about, so if we've got, mentioned Little Jeff is falling behind, needs some support. We have our limited resources and what we're able to do, but how are we able to partner with somebody to say, I've got 45 Little Jeffs that need support. How do we help build a network for that? Or is there a method that we use that to recruit additional resources, or working with other, right? Several of us have worked with other nonprofit partners. So how does that work as us as part of a collaborative hub to bring resources to those students?
In terms of partnerships and resources, we haven't necessarily created that resource map specifically tied to students. And I think one of the first steps that team, if we were to look into what that team is doing, is identifying the why, right? So they're all not going to need the same thing, and looking at groups of students and then determining, okay, instead of 45, these 10 students look like the data shows, and us knowing the students, they need this, right? Where we're problem solving another group. But it's a great point in terms of being able to include and leverage partners. We leverage tutoring, for example, as something that can be used as a supplemental support. But when we get into intense supports, partnership would be great.
So just more interested in your system a little bit, right? So the information, like teachers are feeding this information into the system as they're recording grades and such. Like is it data analysis required to sort of pull all this, or is this kind of readily available based on the systems, the inputs that happen along the way?
The data is available. The structure had to be built for the data to then be input. And so our data analyst put the structure together based on what we needed to pull and where the thresholds would be. And once that system was put together, then the process of feeding that or informing that through new data is not something that's time intensive. So yeah, that building of the system was the first thing. And then we have on each first tab, there's a date so they can see the last date that it was updated, because it is updated bi-weekly in terms of any new data. That lets us know that flags are going downward, right? That things are working and there are less students in the red, or vice versa, that there are new students that we need to take a look at, problem solve, and match up to supports.
Thank you, Roxana. I'll just add, so I'm sure board members will recall at a meeting last year, I said, we need to throw out all of our data practices and start again, and it caused the whole hubbub. But I was serious about that, right? So, a lot of schools, a lot of districts say we are data informed. What they mean is that they collect data, they look at the data. But in terms of how they analyze the data to inform action, that's missing. So yeah, we have lots of data, and we sit down and we talk about the data, but they're not quite doing anything with the data, right? The second thing is that, as Roxana said, we have a lot of the data readily available, but are you looking at the right types of data, right? Because you can start with an end in mind and then find the data to get you to what you already believe exists. So you have to make sure that you're collecting the right types of data as well. And so we were super intentional about what are the different data points that would go into this system, right? So that it is also more objective. And more often than not, in thinking about students, in particular our students, you see how easy it is for teacher bias to show up, right? So when you have a predominantly student body that's Black and brown, high rates of poverty, but then you have a faculty and staff that is 72% white female, right? We know nationally and locally as well, Black and brown boys are twice as likely, if not higher, to be misdiagnosed with learning disabilities. They're more likely to be suspended and expelled, etc., because of these inherent implicit biases that we bring to the discussion. So having this kind of a neutral data system, right? When you sit down as a team and the teacher saying this kid needs to repeat and here's why and here's why, but the data says something different. Or this kid is ready to move on to something else, and well, that's my favorite, and this kid comes to class every day, but it's not from a data perspective really ready to move to the next thing. So having this as a tool helps to make it an even playing field, and we see that a lot. Even when we think about the PID process, I would sit and say, okay, so you need to tell me you have 100 kids in the building that are promotion endowed. How? Why? How did we get to this? And then you see the conversations happening, and it's not necessarily grounded in data or the right data points. And so having this system helps with that and neutralizes some of these other issues that you see here. So this was a heavy lift to build this, and now we got it because this literally we just started this. I think we showed it to staff, the principals, for the first time in December or January. And some folks immediately saw the value and are starting to move to that direction. But when we talk about data-informed practices, this is what we're talking about. And then you can triangulate data. So you now have qualitative data, right, from teachers, from parents, and then you have this kind of a objective data set that's telling you based on different weights, spitting out who's high risk and who's not, and that informs kind of what we do. So this is a heavy lift. I want to definitely congratulate Roxana and Sheng, our data analyst, on building this system from the ground up. We've, similar to the balanced scorecard, and we've just been building a lot of things that didn't exist. And the other thing I would say to your question, Board Member Ray, is we've tried to be intentional about, especially this year, in layering what we're doing. So we first had to get people buying into this promotion endowed system. So it is something that they do, right? Now here is how you make it better by having objective data sets. So we are layering. One lesson for me from last year, if I can be transparent here, is where we kind of fell short often was, we'll come up with some good ideas and we know what needs to be done, but we've been less successful in operationalizing those ideas. And when that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Is the ability to implement something with fidelity. And so even with professional development, we just introduced to our leadership team yesterday this idea that now that we've all agreed that we need to do professional development every Thursday and everyone's bought into that, right? And people are seeing that there's a call to action. How do we make sure when folks leave the PD, they know exactly what to do? So we're like explicitly teaching the strategy of what we want you to do. And then now you have accountability, which has been a problem. Progress monitoring and accountability. So there's a lot of things happening. We spend a lot of money in a bunch of different places. But if you're not progress monitoring, then you say, okay, this is working. Let's pull out. Let's not spend another $1 million on this, right? But if we don't progress monitor and it's just like, oh, I think it's working, and then you have the vendor come in and say, we're happy to partner with you, and let's extend our contract for 3 more years. That's $3 more million. Progress monitoring does not exist. It's something that I realized when we got here, and accountability. So all of these systems are literally things we've had to build from the ground up. As I said in closed session, my primary objective is to build systems that would outlive me. I get hit by a bus tomorrow, these systems are here, and somebody can just come in and pick up and run with it. Systems is how you move things forward, and how the inequities that we have in society are systematized. That's why they're so hard to undo. You have to create systems to undo them and that can replace them. And that's if I do nothing else in my time here, that's the objective. Systems that will outlive me. So just want to thank the team for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is increasing family engagements.
We will be done before I get voted He is a former preacher, so we could be here for a while.
I made the same joke just about 1 minute ago.
I don't think he was Baptist. I think we're fine. He was a Baptist minister.
Yeah.
Just ordered dinner.
All right, good evening. Last but certainly not least is the Student Services team, and we have 2 of our 5 guests here with us. I am Mrs. Davis. This is Adrienne Batiste. We have Miss Carla Levy, Mr. Charles Jamerson, and Ryan Bezo. So on this first slide, this is just going over what our goals were for the year. And so as we focus this presentation, that we will get through quickly, but so that you also understand what we have been doing, it is going to focus on our resource goal through what we are doing for parent engagement through different strategies and resources. And so on the next slide, Ms. Batiste, we'll go over that.
So these are our parent programs and initiatives that we have done this school year. And we have been working diligently on our upcoming program, which will be our Westside Refresh. I have to throw in there, but then we want to encourage everyone to come out on May 11th at Washington High School. We will provide more information to you guys about that. And continuing as we do our projects and initiatives, we'll continue to make sure you guys have all the communication and the events to actually come. And we definitely encourage you, if you want to be part or come and speak to anything that we do have going on, please let Student Services know.
So as we shift away from these programs that were highlighted in the bubbles, the big thing that we wanted to bring to you all was how we are looking at reimagining and re-exploring how we engage with our families. And so as we created our storyboard for this, and I am reading this at this point, not the slide per se, but we're not just creating needed programming and resources, but we are reevaluating how we engage with our families from the ground up. And so we started that process with listening. And so Ryan is going to let you in on a process that has already begun.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to zero in on our parent dashboard project. This all started just over a year ago when CAMBR put out their Thrive Grant Notice funding parent engagement through child data, engaging parents by making them have more access to the data. One of the things we found is that parents didn't need more data because there is so much data that's already being collected, so much data in PowerSchool and in Pearson and all these different places. The data is there. The problem that we've come across is that it's not being accessed by parents. It's not accessible. In this process, we've learned that less than 2% of our parents are actually engaging with the PowerSchool parent portal in any given quarter. So the data is there. It's not getting to parents. We won a $50,000 nationally competitive grant to be able to build a parent dashboard to make the data that is there more accessible. We partner with our partners at Lesson Loop. Lesson Loop is doing student feedback. We're already working with them. So we said if we are needing to listen to parents, let's listen on all the different ways we can listen at the same time. So we're able to listen on the Lesson Loop project that they're doing and listen on this dashboard creation. So you can see this is some of what we're coming to. The idea of how can we get information to parents that's just the info they need, that's easy to access, that's easy to log in. So we're using systems of green, red, yellow, so that you can just look and tell by looking how your student's doing. I don't need to know every assignment. I just need to know when things are going wrong. So is the attendance going wrong? Is the behavior going wrong? Are the assignments not being turned in? But then also on the green side, we think it's really important to emphasize the positive things. So that's the simplicity of the dashboard. Can they just look and glance and see the information they need? In all of this, we want to give feedback that is as simple as possible with the right context, so they can know not only is my kid missing a day, but that means they're missing 8 hours of school, which means they're missing 8 hours of learning growth time. And yes, in the end, basically we're trying to make sure that the parents get the simplest information they need so that they are accessing that data constantly and we can stay in good relationship.
And so now we are going to hear from some of our staff regarding our parent engagement, starting with Mr. Charles Jamerson.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us here. We're going to be talking a little bit about partnerships. Partnerships, first and foremost, nothing more and nothing less than a relationship. And I believe that years ago, we've not been really putting our best foot forward when it comes to it, because I personally believe that anyone that's in the community, business, a church, a local church, or any type of institution, is a part of that community, and they are to be giving to the schools. I think the schools, they actually owe the schools a partnership and to have a relationship with them. And we believe that the schools also owe them back. And so as a result of them partnering with us, then we get an opportunity to put these people back into the community and give back. And I think that some of the ones that we have approached have begun to take on that field, that they are in a position to where they can give back. And so when we first approach them, I try to first personalize it to the point to where I'm somewhat selling myself to them and getting them to a place to where they can begin again to trust, which is the same thing that happens with the parents. Parents are the same way as some of the business partners that we have. They have a lack of trust. We're not going to do with the funds what we say we're going to do with the funds, or we're going to bring them in and then do something different once they get in. So we have to develop that arena of trust. And once we get that arena of trust set up, then we can talk and we can sit down and we can discuss. So I don't really like doing conversations over the phone. Emails with a lot of the partners are not good as well, but it's nothing like the good face-to-face. And even if we have to do it on Zoom, we even like it. I even like it on Zoom, just so they can put a face with the voice, and we can do likewise. So the partnerships that we've designed so far and discovered, they're working fine, but we need to do more. We need to do more. We need to continue to get the community to understand that they actually owe those ones in the community, such as schools, a share in their profits.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. And I forgot to mention that he is from Coquillard, as he is our fax at Coquillard. And how many years you been there?
5 years.
Been there for 5 years. Going on to 6. This is your 6th. And next we have Miss Levy. She is at Harrison. She's a fax for Harrison.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I wanted to just talk about some of the exciting things that we're rolling into for next year. This year was really about, this is my first year here at Harrison. And as a resource person, I had to try to start from the bottom and work my way up with families. And one of those things is being present, listening, having empathy, and then finding the resource, not just telling them, we'll call here at this time. Sometimes it takes that me sitting down and making that phone call for them, or having the, leaving that opportunity for them to come in as an open door policy and help them through those resources. And so one of the things that we did for Black History Month, I put together a Black Business Fair for kids. One of the administrators was like, what in the world is this? So I like to call myself the MacGyver of resources. I'm going to figure it out, take a paper clip and make it and put it together. Those old school ways still are alive. And so as a resource person, I just start calling, as you know. I'm very handy. I'll knock on doors, I'll shake hands. And that's what I did. And I ended up pulling together over 30 vendors, over 20 vendors for barbers. We had a communication and partnership with Notre Dame. Susan over, I can't think of the entrepreneurship program. I love the idea and actually sent me a lot of names that I was able to connect with. I had a nice slideshow. I'm gonna go ahead and wing it. And so with that, within the slideshow, you would have seen those vendors. Those vendors were greeted. So anytime you come to Harrison, not only if you're a family, a board member, a principal, a staff member, a student, you will feel welcome. So we want to cultivate the the hospitality has been missing there. So the staff, the vendors, when they came in, they were greeted with gift bags, and they knew this was not for profit. This was an educational piece for students to learn what entrepreneurship is, something to cultivate. The student who sits there and just draw robots or build robots out of Legos can now believe that he can too become an architect, or he can too be an entrepreneur. And so the 3rd through 5th grade came down, and those vendors served over 300 kids. It was from 1 to 4, and that was on February 23rd. It was also open up to parents. Parents came after 3 to 4, and they were able to purchase things that they choose to. And so it's just an exciting time. And also, it was a great way for me to have now a nice Rolodex of names that I can pull out for next year. And I think the thing for me is making sure that I keep those old school values to remember, yes, today's technology is very much important, but sometimes we just have to sit down with those parents one-on-one and walk them through it. And so just excited about what's happening what doors have been opened for next year. And so I invite you over for Walk Through Wednesdays. You'll always get a warm baked cookie from me. Yes, I said cookie. And you're more than welcome to join us on Walk Through Wednesdays. Thank you.
So the final slide is just as we look back on everything that you heard. I wish it wasn't as short. However, it's taking the central staff, student services team, as well as teaching and learning, business services, Dr. Lewis as our zone chief, Julia here, over here to my right, plus our building staff, and working with our parents and caregivers as we have all shared. And the result is going to be student success. And so it's continuing to be intentional because, again, We are in the business of educating kids, and so that is essentially our goal.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, you may. We are finished.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you finish.
Oh, no, we were done.
We go right to questions. Parent engagement's been a challenge, I think, over the few years here. I appreciate the app or the simplified approach. Is there thought or process, or do you feel as though that will be the answer? If that simplification is the answer, or is it, and I'm not being critical of what you're doing, but is there more than that? Do you think, what if you don't get any uptick? Is there a response, or what do you have ideas on maybe what can be done?
Yeah, and for clarity, the dashboard app is not the solution to parent engagement. The dashboard app is about parents finding the information that they express that they want to know, but there's too many roadblocks to it right now. One thing we've learned from this is how important the communication process is, and learning that parents really respond best to old school text messages. And so, and you know, obviously the need for translation. So we're currently exploring and working as an outgrowth of this exploration for the dashboard app at parent engagement and communication systems that would allow us to more easily meet families in communication where they're at. And I think those efforts will have a lot of fruit on parent engagement.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm going to make a statement, then ask a question. The old school text messages, the easily accessible information, the word that comes to mind with those, it's easy for parents. And so what I would say, I would ask, here's my question, is this whole process easy? Is it easy for parents to get engaged? Because I think that's where you'll find a significant amount of engagement.
Yeah, I mean, we're not to the end of the process creation yet, but that's definitely the goal. The questions we're asking is, how do we make something so simple that people are able to engage it without barriers? Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So when the I guess it's called go off the page, lesson loop, is that what it is?
Yes.
This is the app that we're talking about?
So there's two separate things. Lesson Loop is a company, an ed tech company that has created their own app that is about receiving student feedback to give the student feedback to teachers so that teachers can refine their lessons for the future. So they are doing their own thing separately on that and working with us and Roxana's team in that. But also, since they're already ed tech developers and we have this money to develop this thing, we're working with them on the dashboard. So two separate projects, two separate $50,000 grants, $100,000 in grant money being spent on students in the zone total between the two projects.
Okay, so my question then, I guess, is about the dashboard. Is that the part that the student or that the parent is supposed to be able to look at and quickly know if things are going well or if things are not going well?
Yes, the vision here, and again, we don't know that we'll get to the end. This is only allowing us to get to prototype phase, like with this initial kickoff. The idea is that it would be basically a new front door for Power School. That would be easier to log on. That would be easier to get the access to the information. I liken it to Apple TV or Google TV or Roku. They're not presenting all the streaming options for entertainment, but they're presenting an easy view at it, and then you're still going into the Netflix app if you want to dive deep into stuff there. Same for us is you need to be able to see your kids' information just simply at a glance. If you want to learn more about it, then it's still going to take you into the Power School app. So it's just a new front door that's simple for access.
Okay, so I was under the impression that this is something that was already being used by parents. So my question is null and void now because it's not already in place.
Is there a way to know whether they're accessing or viewing the data?
There will be, yes.
When do we plan to roll this out then?
Again, so the initial $50,000 grant is allowing us to do all the user research and all the prototyping, and then going back to the user. So by the end of this school year, we will be able to have the prototype up and running and be able to go back to parents and ask ask questions and do focus groups as a part of this about their engagement with that. We don't know that this will get us fully to the finish line on that, but the point that I would make the strongest is that what this research has allowed us to do is to learn a lot about family communication and family interaction and what needs and barriers exist there that are bearing fruit in other areas.
And our parents are part of this process, the process that you're going through with this company to build out your platforms.
Yes.
The two separate ones.
Yes.
Our parents are part of that. Are they informed? And then I'm hoping that once it is laid out, that there will be some type of training or information to parents for how to use it. And then I was looking at the part for the attendance, and they're gonna get these texts and these letters. And I'm just wondering, once they get these text messages that say, hey, your child has missed this many days, and here's your formal letter, then what? They just get that and that's it, or is there something after that? And I know that that's probably been built out, but I guess those are some things to think about as you're going through the process.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. On the parent who's been included, yes, there's been one-on-one parent interviews and parent focus groups that have been a part of this process and will continue to be throughout. And really that is what the grant is paying for, is the ability to have the consultants come in with the focus groups. Parents are being compensated for participating in the groups. And yes, one of the things we're learning, in addition to the need for simplified communication, is that every communication notification needs to have an action point that's directly built into it. So whether it's your child has an assignment missing, text your teacher right now. Whatever that action point is, giving parents a clear action point in the moment. Good questions? Any final comments? All right, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good work.
It's dark.
It's dark.
Good job. Thank you.
All right, so the last final item is our last public comment for the meeting. Has anybody signed up for public comment? Anybody wishing to do final comment here? And there isn't. So then the final announcement item is board communications. Reminder that our next meeting is Tuesday, April 16th. We will be at Harrison on Western Avenue for our next board meeting. And with that, I adjourn our meeting at 8:22 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody.